Alright, in this video we're going to be looking at finding g of f when we have an element of f's domain of -2. Now notice we have two equations here, right? We have the g of x equation and we have the f of x. Notice g of x is going to be indicated first, right? So that's our first equation, and then this f is the second equation. And the idea is that when we say g of f, what we want to do is we want to take the answer to f when we evaluate it for -2, which is this second equation, and then we want to take that answer and put it in place of x and then evaluate it. So if that sounds confusing, let me show you what I mean by that. So we're going to go ahead, g is the first equation, so what we're going to do is we're going to start by actually using the second. So notice I circled f. We're going to use this f of x first when it is -2, when the domain is -2. So I'm going to go ahead and replace this x with a -2, and I'm going to rewrite the f of x equation. So we have f of -2 is equal to negative, and anywhere there's an x, I'm going to replace it with a -2. Minus 5. And now what I want to do is I want to evaluate this. Now of course you could do this by hand, right? Or you could do it with the calculator. It's completely up to you. So that you can see what I'm doing, I'm going to go ahead and use the calculator right quick. And so I'm going to go to calculate, and I'm just going to put in what's on the right side of the equal sign. In other words, let me just get my highlighter and kind of box it. That's what I'm going to put in and evaluate. And so I'm going to go ahead and type in my negative sign, parenthesis, -2, close parenthesis, and then -5. Now once I got this typed in, I'm going to hit enter, and notice when it's evaluated it gives me -3. So that's my answer. So I can actually say that f of -2 is equal to -3. Now this is important because we're now going to use this -3 here inside of our g of x equation. So this is our answer. So we're ready for our next step, because the goal is we're trying to find g of f. So we found f, and so now we want to take that f's value, what it's equal to when its domain is -2, and we want to evaluate it in this g of x equation. So I'm going to go ahead and rewrite this over here. So I have g of, but instead of x, I'm going to go ahead and take what we got when we did f of -2, which was -3. I'm going to take that answer, and I'll just kind of draw an arrow pointing up. And we're going to use it now inside of our equation. And this is going to be equal to, and then we have 2x squared. So I'm going to go ahead and put my 2. But in place of the x, I'm going to go ahead and put a set of parentheses, right? Because we're replacing this x with the -3 that we got when we evaluated this function of f. So -3, and then it's plus 4x, so plus 4, but in place of x I'm going to put parentheses again and put another -3, and then we have -6. So at this point what we got to do now is we just have to evaluate this. So I'm going to move this over real quick. I'm going to go ahead and get my highlighter and just go ahead and highlight this little area. So what we have right here, I'm simply going to put it in my calculator. And so I got a 2, parenthesis, -3, close parenthesis, squared, plus 4, parenthesis, -3, close parenthesis, and then -6. And when I hit enter, notice it gives me 0. So what I have is I end up with g of -3 is going to be equal to 0. So this is my final answer. So in the problem in the beginning they gave us this odd notation, right? And they said g of f of -2, and they wanted to know what it's equal to, and the answer is 0. That's all there is to it. The main thing to take away from this is whatever function they tell you first. For instance, this is g, right? that's the one that you're going to end up solving last. The one that's second, because they're saying g of f, you will use the f first to evaluate with the element of its domain. Once you get that answer, you substitute it for your g of x equation. In other words, you replace the x with that value, whatever it happens to be, and then evaluate that final function. So the first one gets taken care of last.